zero waste. So to kick this off, I'd like to do a poll. I know we've got over 70 people attending and from all over the country. So Jenny, go ahead and put up the poll. And if folks can share where they're from geographically, as well as what sector they're from, that'd be great. And then while you're doing that, a few housekeeping items. So this webinar will be about an hour. So we're going to end it at 11. It is being recorded and we'll send it to everyone who registered. Please ask any questions you have in the Q&A. We have disabled the chat, but with the Q&A is where you can put in the questions and we'd love to hear those. We'll either ask them as we go, or if we know the answer is going to be covered later, then we'll wait and then we'll get to it in the presentation. If you have any technical issues, please email Annika Bergen at state.mn.us. That's ANNIKA.BERGEN at state.mn.us. And she will help you with technical issues. And now I'd like to introduce our presenter, Jenny Cadbard. Jenny is an environmental specialist for Dakota County. She's been a proud member of the Reuse Minnesota board for the last 4 years and our president for the last 2 years. She has been talking trash professionally for the last 15 years and waste to reduce trash, I would add, and is very passionate about waste management and consumption reduction. She chose to get her bachelor's degree in biology to fully understand the world she wants to protect. She's trained in social marketing and uses her enthusiasm to educate residents on recycling and reducing waste. She also enjoys the never-ending bike trail system in the metro area and scouting for treasures at local thrift shops. All right, welcome, Jenny.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. Hopefully you can see and hear me. And I will share the results of the poll just so you can see our representation. Looks like we have the majority from the Midwest. Represent Midwest, woohoo! It's sunny out today, so we're all in a good mood, I think. And then what organization? I'm sure I forgot some organizations here, but government, county, and local. That's great because county and local is where we can really make changes. And thank you for everyone for being here today. Okay, thank you, Miriam, for the great introduction. So we're going to talk reuse and the reuse impact. This is a year in the making, actually probably several years in the making, and we want to just share all the results with you. We've been waiting to do this for months, and we're very excited to be here. Like Miriam said, my name is Jenny Cadbard. My day job is with Dakota County in the Twin Cities area. I happen to live in St. Paul, and I am the volunteer president of Reuse Minnesota. So today I'll be talking as the president of Reuse Minnesota, but of course my background with recycling, waste reduction comes from Dakota County and before that in my job history. So let's get started. Okay. So who is Reuse Minnesota? Maybe you've heard of us if you're local. If not, just a little background of who we are. Reuse Minnesota, we were founded in 2012. We are an official 501c3 nonprofit, and we're working to grow and advocate for reuse, rental, and repair. So not just some of the reuse, but broadening it to rental and repair businesses as well. Through our education and outreach and business-to-business networking and policy support, we aim to highlight the importance of reuse and establish it as the norm across the state and nationwide. And we hope to inspire you as well to launch similar programs in your areas if you're not in Minnesota, but also to join us and be involved in the work that we're doing locally. And why do we do it? Well, this is no surprise to all of us probably if you're on this call, but as a reminder, we want to reduce and reuse waste and reuse because of all of these different reasons. We want to conserve natural resources by not creating new stuff, by creating new stuff that also increases pollution and waste. So we want to reduce that. I love Reuse Minnesota because it supports local businesses and creates community. It also builds skill sets with repair and repurposing locally, individually, but also those important businesses that we've lost over the years, like shoe repair and computer repair. We want to really support those. And we know, as you'll see in the report, reuse really opens access to people for those who can't afford things, but also if you just are thrifty and you want to save money. And it saves on materials for production. So we always knew these items. We knew that reuse was good. We have some studies across the nation, and we'll talk about a local study that was done by the state a few years ago. We knew all this, but we really wanted to measure it a little more. So Reuse Minnesota applied for a grant from the Environmental and Natural Resources Trust Fund. If you don't know about this trust fund, it's actually where the majority of our lottery money, when you buy a lottery ticket in Minnesota, it goes to protect our natural resources. And part of that is a grant program that nonprofits can apply for and get money to protect our natural resources. So we are very happy that we were awarded this grant over the last 2 years to work on this project, but also a number of other things. If you attended our conferences over the last 2 years, those were also able to happen because of this funding. So thank you so much to the Department of Natural Resources and the Legislative Citizen Commission on Minnesota Resources. We're so grateful. And with that, we did hire a contractor, Brio Marketing, we were able to hire Brio Marketing to come lead the project with our measurement task force to help us with everything we're about to talk about today. So they are the key drivers of a lot of the data that we have and the mapping tool that we created. So I'm going to try to answer as many detailed questions as I can. But if I'm not able to, it's because I wasn't the actual one messing with all the data. So we will get your questions answered. It just might be after the webinar as we reach out to Brio Marketing and their staff. Okay, so what do we want to know? So we got the funding. We knew we wanted to work on something. So we, with Brio, we set out our goal as to understand how the reuse economy benefits our economy, environment, and society in Minnesota. We had the great foundational work by the Pollution Control Agency, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, which is our state environmental department. They did a wonderful study back in 2011, so almost 10 years ago, all about similar things. How does the reuse economy affect our basic economy in Minnesota? We wanted to build on that by having the environment and societal impacts in there as well. We're very lucky that they did that. And Annika, who was doing the timing for us, and she's answering the tech questions and your Q&A, she knows a lot about this as well, so she can chime in on anything about the study. So we had a timeline of late 2019 to early 2020, and we wanted to build off the current research and even more. We wanted to create a methodology that could be replicable. So over the last 2 years, we kept asking, Brio and our task force, like, make sure to note everything. We want to make sure that we can definitely give this to other people. We want you in other cities and states to be able to replicate this. So that's why I'm so glad a lot of people are on here from other states, because we want to help you do the same thing and hopefully make it easier on you and improve on what we did, because of course we learned a lot of lessons. And we wanted to figure out, how is reuse spread across the state? Similar to, I'm sure, a lot of your states. And if you're in Minnesota, you understand the Twin Cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul, often get a lot of the attention. So, but we knew that anecdotally, reuse happens everywhere. That's the beauty of it. So how is it really spread economically across the state? And how do we tell the reuse story better? How do we use the data that we found to brag about our businesses, the members that are in Reuse Minnesota, and just get more support for them? The big thing, one of the hardest things we had to do at the beginning, was really define what is a reuse business. Now, in our nonprofit, we overarch and say reuse, rental, and repair, all of that is reuse. But how do you actually study that and get into the nitty-gritty? The MPCA report defined a reuse business as organizations reselling an item by the original owner through consignment or donation, salvaging and repurposing materials to extend life, extending a product's life through repair, of course, and then renting. So the MPCA already had set up this nice foundation. What we did is we took those same definitions and we tweaked them a little bit from what we found from the MPCA study. We took off the auto industry out of our study. So that was a big deal for us. So what we found from the MPCA study is the auto industry really takes, I mean, if you can think about everything auto in your state, from oil changes to used cars to car sharing, it takes a lot of the attention away from all the other reuse businesses because it is such a big money industry. So we excluded them because of the high cost of new automobiles really is relative to their useful life. So the decision is skewed towards repairing a car, renting it, rather than buying new. So for example, no one chooses to replace their car with a new car when it's time for an oil change. So we wanted to support businesses where that consumer choice is different. We also included two other things. The MPCA study left out these two latter things here. Businesses commonly involved in reuse activities, but that wasn't their main business. And then businesses engaged in activities beyond reuse. So this is a little tricky because the data you're about to see comes from a source that combines all revenue together. So it was really hard, a bookshop that sells new and used, like half-price books. Well, their reporting revenue is one lump sum. They're not saying, well, 50% of our business is done in the used section and 50% is done in new. It's really hard to tease out all of those numbers. So we lumped it all together because they are complementary. And if one helps the other, then really all of it is helping the reuse industry. So note that is also in here. What we didn't include is in the study scope is any person-to-person reuse. So, Craigslist ads, Facebook Marketplace, Nextdoor sale groups, any buying, sharing in your neighborhood, that would take a whole different study. And we just didn't want to even go there for this study. We wanted to use data that was more reflective of revenue for businesses because we are 501c3, but one of our main missions is to support the businesses in this sector. All right, with those caveats, we came up with the 6 criteria for it to be in our study, to be listed. So if you're not familiar with NAICS codes, lucky you, NAICS codes are the North American classification system. Pretty much when you start a business, any business, you have to choose a NAICS codes. And no one is coming in and auditing your NAICS codes. So we've learned, I know way more about NAICS codes than I ever wanted to. It's something a lot of times we found out that accountants choose without even talking to their business, like, oh, this kind of fits your business, we'll use that. So that is good if you chose a NAICS code that's really right up our alley of reuse, rental, or repair. Not so good when it's completely different and I can't find you using NAICS codes. So what we found out is definitely if you use a NAICS codes related to reuse, resale, secondhand stores, rental businesses, or repair businesses, we gotcha. We included you with your NAICS codes. And there's hundreds of NAICS codes. Now goes on to, we knew we were, even with those NAICS codes, we were leaving out several businesses. So how do we get to them? So businesses regularly involved with reuse activities that we knew about but weren't captured in the above 3 NAICS codes. Similar like bookstores, bicycle shops that of course their NAICS codes might be something like recreation. We use specific NAICS code. We tracked them down to the NAICS codes for them. And all of these codes are in our study will be launched as we're talking now. It'll be on our website. So you can actually see the report and the listing of all of those codes if you need them. And then even with that, we saw that we knew businesses weren't being captured even with the first 4. So we actually did a search, and I'll tell you where we did that search in a second, but we did a search through NAICS codes of businesses with one of the keywords of rental, repair, reuse, thrift, vintage, or consignment. So if they used any of those 6 words in their title of their business, we just did a query search, then we included them. So if you're a consignment shop that didn't put consignment in your business title, we didn't capture you, but you can only do so much, right? So there's that. And then even with that, we knew that some of our businesses weren't being captured as well. So even we found out a few of our board members that own businesses, they still weren't showing up in the first 4 criteria. So we then put in any businesses that are involved in directly in Reuse Minnesota that we just knew. We also knew, even with all of the previous 4 or 5 criteria, people or businesses, Goodwill Industries, Half Price Books, Savers and their affiliates, Salvation Army, they weren't included in any of those NAICS codes as well, but we wanted to include them, obviously. Of course, their main mission might be more societal mission driven, so their NAICS codes would be completely different because their secondhand stores just fund their other mission. So we wanted to include them. Another one, if you're in, especially local in Minnesota, but their national franchise as well, Winmark Corporation is headquartered in Minnesota, and they own Plato's Closet, Music Go Round, Play It Again Sports, Once Upon a Child, and Style Encore. All amazing stores, love all of them. But because Winmark Corporation, their NAICS code wasn't anything in our criteria, but we wanted to include all of their stores, we also made sure to include them in our filtering of businesses. Whew. So with all 6 of those, now we felt better. We defined a reuse business. That was probably the hardest part. Where do we get the data then? What did we need? We needed, and I guess I'll pause right now. Is there anything, Annika, for questions that came in that would be relevant before I move on?
I think one quick one related to the NAICS codes and which ones we selected. There's a question around whether we included libraries more broadly.
Yeah, we didn't actually, and that could be in our future study. We did not, just because they're taxed so differently. It would be a different data set, but we did not include libraries. I think that'd be fascinating for future. Same with the person to person. Good question. All right, so then data that we needed business revenue, employee counts. We got both of those from purchase data from Dun & Bradstreet. And let me tell you, I did not realize how much data was out there for businesses. Like everything is tracked. So of course the data is only as good as what businesses report for tax revenue, report to a number of different systems. Dun & Bradstreet, their whole business is to like comb over all of that data and bring it to one central location, their cloud database, and then they sell it to you. So they sell it as a package, and it's actually not as expensive as I thought it would be, but you can buy the package of data. So we actually bought business revenue and employee counts from Dun & Bradstreet, and that was a great decision. We went back and forth on whether we should just depend on open source data, and I'm really glad we did buy Dun & Bradstreet, because not only did we get the data, but we got the help from them to really filter down and understand the data a little more. So revenue and employee counts we got there. Then open data from most of our departments, Minnesota state level departments, and you can find any of this. And we did track all of this in the reports. You can find all the links to it. County level economic data. For reuse businesses, retail businesses, and total revenue. Employment and wages by state and county level. That was from DEED. And county populations, obviously, we got from the State Demographic Center, which uses census data. And then one that I'll get to in more detail, we wanted more qualitative study. So everything written above or all the other data is quantitative, very number driven, but we know reuse is all about the story, right? Everything has a story, and all of our businesses are person to person where they know their customers. And anecdotally, we knew that. So we wanted more qualitative data. And that is what Brio helped us with the survey, the Reuse Minnesota Impact Survey. I will say also, all the data is based on 2017. That was the latest data when we were doing it in 2019, 2020. I'm sure that you can use updated data as well. The qualitative data from the survey is using fiscal year 2019 now. but we weren't doing any comparisons apple to apple with qualitative and quantitative, so we figured it was okay to leave those as separate years. And I will talk more about the survey in a minute. Okay, so before I get into results, we'll talk about first, like, how do we want to analyze the data that we're getting? So I'm just going to take you through the big three: environment, economic, and societal. So, and then we're going to do key findings. First, environmental impacts. We use the Dun & Bradstreet business data. We use that data, and then this is the big tool that we use, that if you want to do any environmental impacts, this is what we would recommend after our research. It was the Carnegie Mellon's Economic Input Output Life Cycle Assessment, EIO-LCA. So many people are familiar with the process-based LCAs, life cycle analysis, which itemizes the material and energy inputs and waste and emissions outputs for a given step in each cycle of a life cycle. So, such as a can, what resources went into mining for bauxite ore to then process it, to make it into a can, and then recycle or trash it, and then what's the energy analysis for every step along the way. So we're kind of familiar with that. If you're not, it's fascinating. In contrast, this EIO-LCA model, which is originally an economic-only model, first represents the monetary transactions between industry sectors by indicating what goods and services are consumed by other industries, and then correlates that related environmental impact. Whew. So that's why it's a formula that we definitely highly recommend. There are limitations to it as well. One is that the limitation is the age of the data. So it is using 2002 data analysis. A lot's changed in 20 years. So hopefully they are looking at updating that, but that is a limitation. The perspective of the data, so it's using producer prices because it's not consumer prices. So it's using, business to business prices and manufacturing prices. So it's not as, like, usually our revenue data is based on consumer prices, because that's how you pay or how you get money. It's also the retail versus wholesale transactions is a little different. Economic activity at the retail level does not equate to economic activity at the wholesale level. And all of these limitations are in our report too, with more detail. And then the new versus used price variability. We're using the economic activities. The model was used off of the economic model was used by estimating the environmental impacts of new products, like manufacturing new products, not necessarily reuse. So it's a little different for our sector, but we still think it's good. Reuse sector product and services costs can vary dramatically, as you can imagine, from something that improves with time, like a vintage item, or something that is reupholstered, like a couch. It's completely different in different scales. And this can result in overestimations or underestimations. So although we have all these limitations, we want to acknowledge them, but for the sake of this study, we did ignore those limitations. So the method, and I am by far not the expert on this, so we can talk more later if you want to go in deeper here, but here's the method. You assign businesses to specific sectors using their NAICS codes, because you need those sectors to input stuff in the EIO-LCA model. You enter revenue figures for each of those sectors into the model, and there's a website, it's free to use, and to estimate environmental impacts per sector. Then you enter revenue figures for individual activities in the model to estimate environmental impacts per activity. Then you calculate environmental impacts for each business based on their revenue generated for that activity. Whew. So now you have, for sectors and activities, you have revenue, you input it, it plops out environmental effects. And then what we did, we wanted it by county. So then we aggregated all of that, knowing where businesses were located in the state from our previous data. Then we could say, like, per county, what the environmental impacts are of greenhouse gas emissions and water withdrawals that were avoided based on buying used instead of buying new. Whew. So that is a very brief overview of the method. It goes way more detail, and the Carnegie Mellon has all of their formulas. And if you are a formula geek, you can definitely go check that out. It's all open source. You can use it all. And I'm sure I've gotten questions about that. So I'm going to pause and let Annika tell me if I have questions.
Actually, not yet. I think people are probably processing because it is a lot.
Right? It's been a year and I'm still processing.
Oh, for sure. One question to bounce back to just while we're still in the data piece.
Sure.
In the same vein of auto repair, does the study include things like plumbers? And so in contrast, where
Like
we took out the auto
yeah.
repair, correct, did the study keep in plumbers and electricians as a part of the repair scope?
No, it was based more on repair on the retail sector. So anything that you'd have to take to a store to repair. And we got to filter that out by the NAICS codes because there's other NAICS codes for plumbers, electricians, home repair. Yeah, good question.
One other question popped in, and we might need to follow up on this one unless you know one offhand, Jenny, but what are examples of the sectors?
Yeah, I could pull it up. It is in our report, the different sectors, but there's a huge long list. So it's really some basic ones: shoe repair for repair, electronic repair for your computers. For secondhand, that's easier because that's consignment shops. We did include antique stores. Anything secondhand really. So thrift stores, Goodwill, consignment. For rental, this one gets a little trickier because rental can be a big category, and we're going to talk about the effects of rental in some of our data mapping. Rental includes recreational rental too. So it could be rental of a truck, but it could be I don't think, actually, I take that back. We didn't include rental of like car rental or truck rental, like a moving truck, but we included rental of recreational activities. So renting a boat, renting skis, renting, I don't think we have any, but renting clothes like tuxedos, bridal shops, we did include those. I take back bridal shops. You don't rent a dress, but you rent a tuxedo. We should rent dresses though. But we do have a long list. You can see more detail as well in our report. Good.
We have a couple more, but I think we'll save those for the end just to make sure we get through everything.
Great. Okay, on to economic impacts. So this is a little easier. No formulas really. So we use the data from state data from our Department of Revenue and our DEED, Department of Economic and Employment, and from DMB as well. So DMB is Dun & Bradstreet. We used for business data just the total number of businesses for all businesses plus retail businesses and reuse businesses, just to gauge if there's any trends. Revenue we use for total revenue, retail revenue, reuse business revenue, and then revenue per person for total state per person and county per person. And then we got per person, we used demographic data, census data. Employment, so this was from DMB, all employment data, and then retail employment and reuse business employment. And then percentage, so just using everything above, we use like, what is the reuse percentage of all of those? It's a little easier, more straightforward. Ooh. I thought I put social right here, but I guess I didn't. Okay, so key findings, let's talk about it. And actually, I'm gonna go back. I think the slide actually disappeared. I remember yesterday thinking about it and I didn't add it back. So our social data was based off of a survey that we created with Brio. And the survey actually, I'll tell you how to find the survey because we still want people, Minnesota businesses, to take the survey. And we did a marketing campaign to get member businesses and non-member businesses to take the survey back in early 2020. We only got 12 responses. So we are using some of those societal key findings, but we're not putting as much emphasis on them because it's 12 out of all of the businesses isn't a great margin of error for us, but they're still great stories. So we don't want to ignore them either. So we have great quotes. We have some analysis that you'll see in our social impacts, but just knowing that we created the survey, we love the survey, we want people to still take the survey, but we want to grow the survey more before we have hard stances on outcomes. Okay, key findings. Are you excited? I bet you are. Key findings. So in general, it was pretty shocking for all those 6 qualifiers that we had. And I'm sure there were some that we missed because they fell through those 6 criteria. We still had over 10,000 reuse businesses and organizations in the state. That's pretty amazing. We did find that reuse businesses are difficult to pin down using just NAICS codes. So we'd love to do more work on how else we could do that, and to help any businesses as they're starting up to maybe use an appropriate NAICS code so that it would be easier to find them later. We definitely learned a lot about NAICS. And pleasantly, we saw that reuse, of course, is evenly spread across the state. So not just Minnesota, not just greater Minnesota. Of course, by quantity, there are more in the Twin Cities, but we have still a lot in greater Minnesota. And if you're not from Minnesota, we call anything not the Twin Cities greater Minnesota, because it sounds very important. That's what I'm talking about for greater when you see that. We definitely have different hubs that reflect the community, and we'll go into that too, like recreation hubs that we'll see. And reuse stories we see support businesses. All those anecdotal stories still mean something, and we want to share them. Now, the picture that you see there is actually right after this webinar on our website, reusemn.org, and you can actually go to it. I have the link down here on the bottom of the slide, is this wonderful map that Brio and their counterparts made. And it's an interactive map where it's a drop down, and we're going to see some of the maps there, but you can actually click on different areas for different counties and get specific county level data. Now at the start, if you can see my mouse maybe, we have this take the impact survey. So you can actually, if you're a Minnesota business, we'd love for you to take that survey. It's pretty easy, and that just bumps up our numbers for analyzing more social impacts. We also have all the data that I'm referencing. You can download right there from the website. So you can download all of the revenue data, everything I'm about to talk about is there. So you can reference it. And Annika did just link it also in the chat. Okay, going into each sector. So economic. Reuse, we definitely knew this, but now we have stats. Reuse grows state and local economies. So reuse, those 10,000 businesses, over 10,000 businesses, generate $5.8 billion in revenue about that every year, based on 2017. That's about $1,000 per person in the state each year. That's big. And the 10,000 businesses make up about 7% of all statewide businesses. So taking all state businesses, 7%, that's almost 1 in 10 businesses could be considered reuse, rental, or repair. That's amazing. Other things we learned too, especially qualitative, we create local and hyper-local businesses. One thing that is in the Department of Economic and Employment Department for the Minnesota, they're finding more and more that retail is moving online. Not shocking, right? Especially during the pandemic, but some of their later report, the last few years reports are showing that more and more of state revenue is coming from outside the state. Like their retail is not headquartered in Minnesota, although we're getting some of that revenue. So the great thing about reuse is that we're still getting local dollars spent locally, even hyper locally, and that means by neighborhood. So you go to your local repair shop for your shoes down the street, or you try to find someone, if you're supporting these businesses, you usually are more community minded as well. That's great to brag about. We create jobs of those businesses. 55,000 jobs are created through those businesses. So about 1% of overall employment. That's wonderful, 55,000 jobs. And jobs are distributed across the whole state, not just in the metro. So here's one of those lovely maps that you'll find on that reusemn.org. Here is the reuse business revenue by county. So you can see here, of course, the Twin Cities. If you don't know our state well, Twin Cities right there. And it's a little, it's not as easy to see, but if you don't know the shape of Minnesota, it's this funny looking kind of shape here. So Twin Cities right there, and we have a little overlap in Wisconsin. Then you see this one thing, this anomaly that we found was this hot spot here, and we dug a little more into it, and that's Aitkin County. If you've never been to Aitkin County, beautiful area, that's where a lot of recreation happens on lakes. So Big Sandy Lake is there, a few other lakes. So it's kind of a hotbed of rental recreation. So that's really cool. They have a great hotspot that we would have never known about. Rochester's down here. We also have some hotspots. This is Mankato. There's I forgot what this hotspot is, but we do have some hotspots that we would have never realized. So that's revenue by county. I believe I have, oh, there we go. So here's a chart. See that Aitkin County, bam, that's 11% of their whole county revenues from retail, rental, or repair. And I think we did find that a lot of it was rental or repair of boats and RVs and all that fun recreation activity. Chisago, similar, is right above the Twin Cities. So we could get a little bit, I don't think there was any anomaly that kind of, or any specific reason why they were higher. But you can see reuse revenue by county. And all of these, if you don't know Minnesota as well, Sherburne is St. Cloud area. Hennepin is Minneapolis area, and everything else is in greater Minnesota. So even in Hennepin, 3% of their total revenue, and that's Minneapolis included, 3% is still from secondhand store or reuse rental repair stores. Pretty amazing. Okay, another lovely map. Here's employment. So it is a little different. You see that hotspot disappeared. So revenue, they gain a lot of revenue in Aitkin County, but maybe don't employ as many people for that revenue. But here's a hotspot near St. Cloud. And then we just have these are all in the report as well, but you can see population, employees, percent of employees versus all employment, and employment per capita for greater Minnesota, the metro area, which is a 7 metro area county or 7 county area, and Minnesota totals. So we're right under 1% of total employment. I think we're moving, oh no, another one. Here is statewide reuse employment by county. So here's Hennepin. That's pretty amazing. That's Minneapolis. That's a huge chunk. Here's St. Paul is in Ramsey County, and another Anoka is another. Scott, Carver, and Anoka are all in the Twin Cities, and so is Dakota and Washington. So what we did find that was interesting is, and this is in the report, for the population, all of the Twin Cities had their reuse employment and revenue was pretty proportional to their population for the Twin Cities, except Dakota and Washington counties. So those are areas that we're going to reach out to, Dakota and Washington, to boost up some of their reuse economics in their counties. Okay, before we get into environment, any questions come in for economic stuff? You might be muted, Annika. Okay, then we will move on. Environment. Okay, so we know that reuse reduces waste. We quantified, we wanted this, I had an asterisk here because we do, from our surveys, 80% of our members that took the survey accept donations, which is amazing. Now, if I had more surveys, I'd put more emphasis on this data point, but of the 12 surveys we got in, 80% of them took donations. I'd love to have that as 80% of 100 surveys that came in accept donations, but right now we don't have that. But these other two are using that Carnegie Mellon formula. So for waste reduction or for greenhouse gas emission savings, when I talk about either of these, greenhouse gas emissions or water emissions, it's a little hard to think about, but it's the avoidance of the emissions or water usage by avoiding new products being manufactured. Hopefully that makes sense. It's a little hard to, it's abstract, but we save these amounts by not producing new stuff. And for greenhouse gas emissions, so CO2 and other greenhouse gases, we avoided over 2.7 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent emissions per year. Now, if you have no idea what a metric ton is, I get it, hard to think about, but it's about 110 Statue of Liberties, the weight of 110 Statue of Liberties, if that helps. I know you all know how much a Statue of Liberty weighs. And for water uses, so we did not use water, we didn't make new products, so we didn't use the water that would be used for new products, and by that we saved, or we had a reduction of 67 billion gallons that we avoided from freshwater withdrawals from ground and surface water sources. So that's over 10,000 Olympic swimming pools, or if you're in Minnesota, one of our biggest lakes is Lake Mille Lacs. That's 155 Lake Mille Lacses. That was a fun calculation to do. It's one of our biggest lakes. It's huge. That's a lot of water. That's a similar chart of businesses, reuse businesses, greenhouse gas emissions avoided, water withdrawals avoided, and then per capita for either of them. So you can see, and this also is in the report as well. So Minnesota totals right here. That's what we used. And a pretty map to also show you that. So similar, Aiken is right there. And of course, this isn't surprising because the model uses revenue generation. So it's not surprising that our revenue map should look similar to our environmental maps because it's using that revenue. But here's that Aiken County and Hennepin, which is Minneapolis, where Minneapolis is. So this is avoided greenhouse gas emissions per its metric tons, and then by county. Here's water withdrawal, similar. So some spots for water withdrawal. And a graph for that too. So Hennepin is leading there. Our unfounded theory, after discussing this for many months, is Hennepin might be more for water, because if you look at greenhouse gas emissions, that could be anything from transportation to manufacturing, but water is used way more for making textiles. And we do know that Hennepin has more secondhand stores and thrift stores for textiles, for clothing. So our unfounded theory might be, okay, Hennepin is the leader in saving water from reuse because they just might have more reuse of textiles. I'd love to dive into that a little more too. Key findings for social. So here's based on our qualitative data, our survey. So reuse builds community. Obviously we know that, but it's so nice to hear that from businesses that took our survey too. So business to customer camaraderie. A lot of the local stores know their neighbors, their customers. They know what's happening in the community. So you can't ignore that. It's amazing. Especially if you drop into Repair Layer on Lake Street, where Nancy Ford is almost every day, as she's on our board, and she knows what's happening. She knows everything, and she will have a conversation with you as long as you want and get you caught up on everything. So they're like the little, they're almost like the salons of our area. Like, you get the scoop of what's happening, and they know their customers well. Reuse also is more of an event, an experience for people, especially I know for millennials as well, and now Gen Zers. Going thrifting with friends and hopping along to different thrift stores is more of an outing. It's similar to like I have to go shopping or I have to go grocery shopping. I get to go to the farmer's market. Similarly, it's like I have to go buy new pants or I get to go thrifting. kind of a similar way of thinking. It's fun. It's a treasure hunt. And there is a community of thrifters. We've seen this as the growing Facebook groups, like Buy Nothing groups. People know they're keeping an eye out on thrift stores. They know other high thrifters. There are thrifter influencers as well. So there is a community there. And then reuse provides access and opportunity. This was kind of an aha moment for me going through this study, but reuse, it's not just for low income, and that is a stigma that that we want to put aside because it is reuse and secondhand is becoming more commonplace, and rental in the low waste movement and just a simpler lifestyle movement. But renting, repair, and reuse makes recreation affordable. So someone who can't afford a new RV or a boat that they might use twice a year, or even cross-country skis if you're in Minnesota, you have access to that activity through rental, reuse, and repair. It also lowers the price on luxury items, like I just said, for boats. Of course that is. Like I've never bought a new car. I know we're not talking about cars, but I would definitely be able to afford something that a luxury item, even like a fancy watch or jewelry through secondhand, way better than I could afford new. And skill building through rental and repair. And I'm not just talking about skill building. Almost all the metro counties provide fix-it clinics to increase skill building, which we know is valuable for person-to-person skill building and feeling empowered to repair things. But also the kind of dying generation of repair shops, building those back up so that people can be trained in shoe repair, electronic repair, reupholstery. Those are skills that we might lose if we didn't have these stores. And not surprisingly, a lot of the our reuse businesses are socially driven. Just like Goodwill, the reason why their NAICS code isn't a rental, repair, reuse is because they're actually, their whole mission is to help people. Goodwill Easter Seals in Minnesota, they are just using the funds from secondhand to access more services for their clients. Same with Arc Valley Village. Their whole thing is to help developmentally or physically disabled people in our area, and they fund that through their multiple thrift stores. All right, wrapping up then, telling the reuse story. So we have two things in the report that I'll just highlight briefly. From Brio Marketing, they're a marketing firm, so they helped us develop marketing possible main messages for a marketing campaign for our organization, but also marketing strategies for businesses. So leaning into those reuse stories really. And I'm not gonna read all of this, but you can find that in our reports, or you can read it yourself here. But really leaning into that secondhand, like we should never be ashamed of secondhand. We should be proud of providing access to people, supporting our communities and businesses. All right, the future looks vintage, looks used. So in our short term, we would love to dive into current data anomalies like Aiken County, like really see what's going on there a little more. We want to engage with individual business around that data and really collect more for those storytelling, and to test out like businesses in the metro and greater Minnesota. Could you use this data? Will it help you bring people into your store and actually help your business? And of course, you want to collect more survey data. And that's why I'm encouraging all of you to, if you're in Minnesota and you own a business or you work with those small businesses, push them to take the survey or call us and we'll take it for them with their info. Long term, we want to support reuse businesses by establishing certain, really highlighting certain counties that have growth potential. So Dakota and Washington counties in the Twin Cities, but also hubs around the state as well, using this data. We want to repeat the data or the survey and study again in a few years, just using more current data, because that would provide us with trends. We want to definitely document trends. And we have found something that we missed in our surveys and our data collection, but we don't want to ignore, is we'd love to have more social impacts documented of how reuse helps or how it impacts racial and gender equity, underserved communities, and our non-traditional workforce. Because we heard it anecdotally, but we would really love to document it more so that we can show those social impacts more. And with that, my last slide here, and then we'll take some more questions, is please join us. This is our board, and we would love to have you as a member of Reuse Minnesota, a volunteer for one of our committees, or on our board. We have some opportunities coming up. The fourth Tuesday of every month starting this month, and it's on our website now, is reuse roundtables. So just sharing, they're mostly a topic led, like we'll have a topic for each one that people can react to, or we'll bring in a presenter. Then we just want to hear from everybody what's happening in your sector. You'll be getting a survey right after this. As soon as we're done, I'll launch it. And it's, please take it. And the last question is from Minnesota-based people of what would you like to hear? Do you want to hear about junk companies? I know that's been a big one for the pandemic as well, hiring junk companies, and then where does that junk go? How can we make it usable, put it back into the market, or marketing, or oh, I had a few other examples, but I am forgetting them. So please let us know if you have any ideas that could be enlightening to all of us, and we'll do the research. So with that, I put my email down there, our generic email, but I check that inbox and I can answer questions later on. Again, we are recording and we'll take a few questions.
All right, lots of questions. So thank you all for your engagement. This is a lot of fun. I think a lot of the questions, Jenny, that are popping up are still more around like what businesses were included. So you may have touched on this a little, but can you talk more about whether online rental businesses or online businesses in general were included? So an example is Rent the Runway.
No, we weren't. We didn't include anything that wasn't based in Minnesota. So we might have some tax revenue from that, but if they're based somewhere else, we didn't touch it. So any of those online businesses, and I don't think, off the top of my head, I don't think we had any online businesses like that based in Minnesota.
Awesome, thanks. Was lodging included in the figures? So an example would be cabin rentals.
Yes, we did not include those in our NAICS code analysis.
Right. So this is a question more about the storytelling. So how are you using stories to advocate for right to repair in Minnesota?
That's been a main part of our discussion too for right to repair. If you don't know what right to repair is, it's really passing legislation by the state so that electronic manufacturers like Apple and that's all I can think of, Apple, even John Deere, right now, the local repair shops can't get manuals, or they have to like get manuals kind of illegally, or they can't get certain parts for things if you're not a certified repair shop for one of those products. When you could take your car anywhere to get repaired, we feel like it should be the same way for electronics. You shouldn't be limited by an approved, authorized dealer, especially if you're out of the Twin Cities. There aren't any. You'd have to go, like for iPhone, you'd have to and the only approved one would be like the Apple Store in the Mall of America, that kind of thing. Like that's not fair and equitable. Same for our farmers. For John Deere, right now, they can't get their tractors repaired, and they're all computer driven now. So you have to take it to an approved shop, which costs a lot more as well. So yes, we use those stories from our members that have told us that. So when we write letters and make phone calls and testify for our legislature, we use those stories to really show the impact of our local businesses. Hopefully that answered the question.
Yes, thank you. I know we're running close on time, so I will note that if you didn't get your question answered live, that we will be going through these and can follow up. Also want to direct you to my email that I shared in the chat earlier. So also feel free to email directly, and then I'll loop in Jenny and Miriam as well, but we can answer follow-up questions, or if you really want to dive into more details. We're also excited to have one-off meetings as well, so we can schedule something and get into more of the weeds. Actually, one more thing. So maybe we don't have time for one more question, apologies, but I know we wanted to talk about where people can access the report. So that might be a good place to wrap up on.
Yes, so I didn't get to do it beforehand. We have the whole website ready to go, but we didn't want to launch it until we wanted you to be the first ones to hear all the data. So as soon as we're done, it will be, if you go to, I'm going to share my screen here. If I can find it. Share. So here's our website. Hopefully you can see it. So Reuse Minnesota is just reusemn.org. Here's our website, and it will be under the resources. We'll also put it a blurb on the front page too, so it'll be right there for you. But it'll be under here for the impact report. You'll be able to click it and have all of the reports, the presentation slides, and when we're ready, we'll have the webinar recording there as well. And it'll have a link to the map.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenny. Right on time. So
Woo!
again, thank you all for joining us. As you can tell, we're really excited to have this report live and available, and very much encourage you to explore the interactive site that Brio and their partners created, dig into more of those details. And if you do find anomalies or you have questions about what you're seeing, we'd love to engage in that conversation too as we continue exploring it as well.
Thank you all so much for being here, and please keep in touch. And you should get a survey right after this. Please let us know what you think and how we can improve our organization as well. Thank you all.
Thanks so much.